Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, eating less, moving more, really trying, and your stomach just won't get flat? Like, no matter what you do, it won't budge. And maybe you're even considering peptides at this point. If that's you and you're sick of it, this episode is for you, because what if there's more to the story than just calories in and calories out? That's what I want to explore with you today, and hopefully renew your sense of optimism that the flat belly that you want is possible without injections. And before we go any further, I'm not against peptides. I've actually explored a lot of them myself personally, so you'll probably hear about that in other episodes. Not against them, but I just want to offer another perspective so that you can learn about how these things work, and then you feel informed about all the options that you have. And if you don't know much about my story, I understand what this is like, because in my early 20s, I was running like 10 miles a week. I was eating less and less. I was constantly telling myself to be stricter, and I looked skinny fat. I'd slowly gained 15 pounds after my gut fell apart, and I couldn't figure out how to lose it, which really confused me because I'd been naturally thin my whole life while eating whatever I wanted. And what's wild is it wasn't more discipline that finally changed things. It was actually healing my gut. So within a few months of my gut issues going away, I lost the 15 pounds without running, without a gym membership or dieting. I was just doing some yoga and walking with my dog. And it made me curious, what is actually going on between our gut microbiome and our weight? So today we'll be diving into that, the connection between your gut and your weight. Even if your digestion feels totally fine, I think this is going to be really insightful and helpful for you. And in case we haven't met yet, my name's Heather. I specialize in gut health. I work with lots of women and men who are dealing with mystery weight gain or weight loss resistance, despite doing everything right. We've helped countless people break through these plateaus. So let me spill the tea on how. First, let's look at a few surprising examples of how the gut affects weight. So first, your gut helps decide how many calories you actually absorb. Two people can eat the exact same meal and absorb a different number of calories from it based on the bacteria in their gut. So two people can eat the exact same salad. One will absorb 500 calories from it, and the other may absorb like 550 or 600 calories. That sort of thing can definitely add up, and we don't really have an easy way to account for this variability when trying to track calories, so it can really throw things off. It's one reason that people struggle to lose weight, because they may think that they're in a deficit when they really aren't. And I'm not suggesting cutting more calories. We'll come back to solutions here in a sec. But first, I just wanted to mention that not all calories are equal in every microbiome. And I want to illustrate this point for you because there was a great landmark study in 2006 that really changed the way that we think about weight. A landmark study is sort of like a pivotal study that changes our understanding. And in this study, researchers took identical twins where one was lean and one was heavier. They put each of the twins' gut bacteria into mice that had no bacteria of their own. So they were like sterilized mice. Then they fed the mice the exact same food and gave them the exact same exercise. And the mice that got the heavier twins' bacteria gained weight and body fat, whereas the mice that got the lean twins' microbiomes remained lean. They later did other similar studies to this where they actually reversed it as well. So then they were able to transfer the lean microbiome into the obese mice, and they became lean again. So this was just, the original study, and it was just the beginning of us realizing that we can actually think about obesity and weight gain and fat gain as something that is transmissible. So similar to how we can transmit the flu. It's almost contagious via fecal microbiome transplant. This is the first reason your gut impacts your weight. It impacts how many calories you actually absorb. Super interesting. Second, your gut controls the hormones that tell your brain when you're hungry and when you're full. You can imagine how this would impact your weight goals a ton, because if you're feeling full, you stop eating. And if you're constantly hungry, staying in a calorie deficit to lose weight becomes a lot harder. And there are 3 appetite regulating hormones that I want to cover today. So we have leptin, which is your main satiety hormone, which works by assessing how much stored energy you have, like body fat, and regulating your need for more food based on that. Then we have GLP-1, which is another important satiety hormone that impacts insulin, and it responds after each meal. So it creates that sense of satiety that stops the desire to keep eating after every single time that you eat. And then third, we have ghrelin, which is your hunger hormone. So we're going to get into each of these now. So leptin is kind of your fuel gauge. It's supposed to tell your brain how much energy you've already got in the tank. If you you have plenty of stored body fat, for example, you'll typically have high leptin levels circulating. But what often happens is if inflammation is high in your body, the leptin can't really get into the cells very well. And this is referred to as leptin resistance. So when someone is struggling with their weight, their leptin usually isn't low, but their brain just isn't hearing it. So you can be walking around with a full tank and still feel truly physically hungry. Giving in and eating or overeating from that state is not the same as lacking willpower. This is truly a brain and body miscommunication. Now let's talk about GLP-1. Your gut makes this for free, all on its own after every single meal. And when you feed the beneficial bacteria in your gut, particularly those that are butyrate producers, butyrate is the messenger that triggers GLP-1 to release. So you eat foods that these specific butyrate producing bacteria like to eat, and they will make butyrate from it. And then that tells GLP-1 to release. I hope this makes sense so far. So now as a result, you get the sensation of being satiated from that GLP-1. So you no longer feel the need to keep eating more and more. The presence of GLP-1 makes eating less feel more effortless, which is why products like Ozempic that upregulate GLP-1 help with weight loss. Okay, now your hunger hormone, ghrelin. Ghrelin runs high before you eat, and then it drops once you've eaten. So you feel satiated and you move on. But imbalanced gut bacteria can result in ghrelin levels actually staying high after you've eaten. So you basically eat and you still feel super hungry and unsatisfied. If you're listening to this and you've experienced this before, you're probably going, oh my God, I'm not crazy. Finally, somebody said it. Personally, I experienced this for a really, really long time, many, many years. And when I learned this, it was very validating for me to hear. So I hope you guys feel that way too. But, if you feel super hungry and unsatisfied after a meal, that's a sign that ghrelin has not dropped to reflect the meal that was just consumed. So there are certain foods that really flare this and certain foods that can kind of reduce this impact, which we could probably go into at length in another episode too. But just to name a few, the more highly processed, high saturated fat meals tend to keep ghrelin higher, so you stay hungry. And this is because they promote something called endotoxin being absorbed, which we'll talk about here in a sec. Supplementing with certain probiotics has actually been shown to reduce this effect by 40% in one study, which is really cool. And not to get too in the weeds on this one, but actually the microbiome and the bacteria in our gut can really impact this. So if you put these three hormones together, if you feel hungry all the time or like you can eat and never actually feel satisfied, that's because your gut just can't clearly tell your brain that you're good. And the third reason that your gut controls your weight, so we already talked about the calories, we talked about the hormones, and the third reason that your gut controls your weight has to do with the gut lining itself. So earlier I mentioned how inflammation can cause your hormones to stop working well and to stop signaling to the brain effectively, especially when it comes to your appetite, your hunger, and your satiety. Well, let's go a little bit deeper into this. So what's causing the inflammation? Oftentimes, a big hidden cause of chronic inflammation can be leaky gut. So this is because when your gut is leaky, things leak into circulation that should not be there, and it sets off inflammation all over the body. The biggest trigger that's leaking into circulation, setting off the inflammation, is something called endotoxin, which I briefly mentioned before. This is a bacterial toxin. Your gut microbiome is supposed to be what contains most of the bacteria in your body. And so when this gut lining is leaky and you have intestinal hyperpermeability, now these bacterial toxins can get into circulation. And that is a huge trigger for a lot of the chronic inflammatory responses that happen. This is so much more common than people realize. And I think in the next couple of years, this is going to become a really trending topic of conversation because it has been linked to so many different diseases, especially autoimmune diseases, which we're starting to recognize to be a lot of them, even things like diabetes, is linked back to autoimmunity and leaky gut specifically. So now that you have intestinal permeability or leaky gut, and some of the bacterial toxins from your gut are leaking into your blood and setting off this inflammation in your body, and that's actually blocking things like GLP-1 and leptin from telling your brain that you're full after meals. It's also keeping that ghrelin high so you feel starving even when you just ate. That same inflammation is also making your body resistant to insulin, and when you're insulin resistant, your body gets pushed towards storing fat instead of burning it. And we know that all of this is real in humans. It's not just theory. So when researchers infused endotoxin into healthy volunteers, their inflammation markers climbed and they became measurably insulin resistant within hours. And honestly, this part makes me kind of sad, but when inflammation is high, we also tend to see motivation and willpower drop. So you're not just inflamed, but you feel flat and foggy, unmotivated. And in that state, you might reach for a quick dopamine hit of a processed food, which just feeds more inflammation and keeps the whole cycle going. Then when you finally do try to cut back and eat better, your hunger and fullness hormones are still so dysregulated that your body fights you the whole way. So it's not one thing that you're up against here, it's all of it at once, and it can make it really, really tough to reach your goals when everything feels like it's working against you. I really felt this personally. I felt like my hunger was insatiable. I felt like I was always hungry, and I would kind of restrict throughout the day, knowing that once I opened that can of worms, my appetite would be so insatiable. And then I would become so bloated and uncomfortable as a result of overindulging. And I blamed myself because I thought I just lacked willpower. But at the same time, I knew that when I was like a young, lean teenager, I definitely ate. I ate freely. I ate a lot of calories, but I never felt like I was eating to a point of feeling sick or like I was overindulging or making myself unwell from eating. And when I was dealing with these gut issues, it really felt like I was causing the problem. And at the same time, when the very thing making you unwell is the thing that you need to stay alive, that you're supposed to be eating 3 times a day, it creates a lot of conflict and cognitive dissonance and shame in the mind, which I can talk about endlessly, how much that ate at me, no pun intended, for years. I really thought the solution was just to have more willpower. And at the same time, I really felt like it was impossible to have more willpower. And now it makes total sense. And at the time, I think what my doctors missed was the leaky gut, the endotoxemia, the dysregulated hormones of it all, and none of this was looked at. So how do you actually fix this? The good news is that all 3 of these drivers, the calorie absorption, the hormone signaling, and the gut inflammation, respond to the same interventions. Start by shifting towards a diet rich in plant fibers. This is going to feed those butyrate-producing gut bacteria that we need to trigger GLP-1 production. That's also going to lower inflammation, improve the gut barrier integrity, and at the same time, you're shifting the pH of your colon to be lower, which is going to suppress the growth of inflammatory bacteria that produce endotoxin and are associated with more metabolic issues and weight gain. You'll also want to limit processed foods, obviously, things that are super, super high in saturated fat. I'm not demonizing saturated fat, but we want it balanced, and eating a lot more plant fibers is going to keep that more in balance. And this is going to be very, very effective at reducing the amount of endotoxin that gets absorbed, which will keep inflammation lower and keep hunger and satiety hormones more balanced. Some people benefit from prebiotic supplements. Prebiotics are fibers that selectively feed certain types of bacteria, so that you can kind of rebalance your gut ecosystem a little bit more strategically. So they help to feed the good bacteria in your gut faster than diet alone. And which ones you need or would benefit most from will depend on your specific gut. So this is something that we can really easily determine through gut testing. When you add in new foods, especially fiber-rich foods, always go slow. Otherwise, you run the risk of making yourself really bloated and uncomfortable. I promise that patience pays off here. The timeline is not going to be instant. Healing the gut lining and restabilizing your microbiome takes time, but as that happens, your hunger signals will normalize, your inflammation will drop, and your body will stop fighting you constantly. And that's when the weight loss becomes effortless again. So breaking through a plateau sometimes requires a little bit of strategy, not just cutting calories, not just being in the gym more and more. And this, like I mentioned before, it doesn't only relate back to people that experience things like bloating or burping or food intolerances or unhealthy bowel movements. This can apply to people who don't have any necessarily gut-related symptoms or complaints. These issues can still be going on and oftentimes are. And when you rebalance the gut microbiome, many times that is the missing link to somebody breaking through their weight plateau. If you've done everything right and your body still won't budge, that body fat won't budge, you can't break through the plateau, you're weight loss resistant, you're gaining weight for no reason, and you're realizing that it might not just be because of willpower and it might be connected to your gut, that is exactly what we help people with one-on-one inside of our Gut Health Glow Up program. We look at what's actually going on inside of your microbiome, your bacteria, your inflammation, your gut lining, and ultimately help you eat, dress, and live with freedom again so that you can feel confident in your body. If you're interested in working one-on-one together, DM me podcast on Instagram, or I'll leave some links down below. And if you want, I have a bunch of free guides available, which I'll also link down below. And if you found this episode helpful, reviewing it or giving it a thumbs up or stars or whatever the thing is on the platform you're listening or watching on. Any of that engagement really tells the platform to share it with other people who are searching for this kind of info. So you can support the channel and help others find this information anytime if you enjoy it by doing that. If you made it to the end of this episode, good on you. I know that was a little bit of a dense one. And drop me a comment if you would like me to do a little bit more focus on the actions. I know I kind of focused more on the problem in this episode. So if you're wanting more about, the diet piece and how you can start to impact these different hormones and the different gut elements of weight loss resistance, let me know and I can work on another episode for that. Anyways, that's all for today. I'll talk to you on the next episode. Bye.